Greetings. My name is General Alistair Awesome, and I'm a veteran of many of gaming's greatest wars. You see, when demons invaded Mars, I stood beside my fellow Marines, including Doomguy. When the Covenant came for Earth, I fought alongside Master Chief in Halo. When the Reapers came to wipe out all life in the galaxy, I stood beside Commander Shepard in Mass Effect. I was there, working at GameStop, when some of the greatest games ever made hit the shelves. Games like BioShock, Assassin's Creed.
Hey, whoa, what is it with you guys constantly using my recording setup without asking?
I was simply recounting my most glorious battles in games like BioShock.
And Assassin's Creed, yeah, I know the bit. I don't think anybody on the podcast worked with us at GameStop, though, so I'm not sure why you think this old inside joke's gonna work here, but okay.
Well, perhaps gaming is a universal language. After all, some of the greatest games have spoken to us in ways that we can't describe. Games like BioShock, Assassin's Creed.
Okay, enough. Just get out. Once again. Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Saved as Draft podcast, the only show where I, Bradley Ramsey, talk to you about the craft of writing, what I'm working on, and why you should care. Welcome to episode 6. You know, I'll tell you, earlier this week about Wednesday, I figured that I had plenty of time to get this episode together. Thought things were going pretty well, actually. And then I got a big lesson in unpredictability. A huge snowstorm came through, and as many of you may have heard, it knocked out power and internet here at my house for a while. The power itself was out for about 24 hours, and the internet just came back up right before I started recording this. So, fun stuff. As you can imagine, that threw a few wrenches in my proverbial gears, but hey, I'm not about to let uncharacteristically severe weather stop me from getting this podcast out. As they say, the show must go on. And I mean, sure, the Earth is crying for help, and the weather patterns are only going to get worse. But I'd like to think that Mother Gaia enjoys listening to my podcast here, between her attempts to rightfully smite us from the face of the planet like the parasites we are. On a lighter note, Flash Fiction February continues to be an incredible display of talent and creativity. We are at the halfway point of this month-long challenge, and I, for one, am very excited to see how the second half goes. We've been switching up genres and adding in wildcard prompts every few days, which allow people to pick the genre they want to use, and that keeps things interesting. But we're going to have to see what else we can do in the second half of the month to keep everyone on their toes. Now, I realize that sounds like I have something up my sleeve, but I don't. At least not yet. I am, however, doing this to hold myself accountable and trick my brain into coming up with something now that I've promised to do it. You know, it's like reverse psychology. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's get to this week's shoutouts. So as you know, last week we had our whole Devine Challenge award ceremony, and this week we're going to get back to kind of a standard structure here. I'm thinking 6 or so writers and stories that I'd like to highlight from the past week, with a particular focus currently and for this month on flash fiction that I think did something really cool or unique with the prompt. So with that in mind, here are my picks for you to check out, and keep in mind you can find links to these in the show notes. Shoutout number 1 is Mina Howell's Destruction of Self. This post-apocalyptic take on the Wendigo legend is nothing short of inspired. It's a very intense piece, I will say that. There's a lot of body horror, there's some violence involving the family in the story. It's not for the faint of heart. However, it does showcase a descent into madness and desperation that is nothing short of brilliant in my mind. And personally, this is a new favorite of mine from Mina, who has, in the past, had some of my favorite horror stories as well, so that's high praise. Shoutout number 2 is Spencer D.W.'s prompt from day 11. The title is in French, but I translated it with Google, hoping that it's a decent translation, and the English translation of the title is The Spirit of the Staircase. If you haven't checked out Spencer's work yet, please do yourself a favor and remedy that. I'm already hearing some buzz right before I wrote this script about their Valentine's Day story, and I have yet to check it out, otherwise I would have shouted it out here, but in general, their horror is unlike anything else I've read on Substack, including my own. It's dark, surreal, atmospheric, and visually just stunning with the imagery and word choice. So do yourself a favor, check out that title. It's the only one I think that they've done in French. Not the piece, mind you, the title's in French. So it should be easy to spot. But it's fantastic, and then once you finish reading it, feel free to binge the others, but only if your mind can handle it. It's pretty scary stuff. Shout out number 3 is Andrew Kohler's Last Best Laugh. This piece was a fun take on one of the flash fiction prompts from the last week, and it uses italics to emphasize some of the language in the story where the character's been drinking, and I thought that was a really clever way to kind of emphasize the style of the dialogue, and it has a surprise twist at the end that I really enjoyed. Also, shout out to Andrew, whose birthday was this week, and happy belated birthday. I know I said so in the comments, but wanted to say it again here. Shout out number 4 is Kristen Rosenbach's The Great White One's Gift. And I'm going to do my best not to cry here, but here's the thing. If I do, I'm just going to re-record this because I can't be doing that on the middle of the podcast, at least not this early on in the series. But in all seriousness, this story is a piece that Kristen did in remembrance of her dog that passed away last week named Callie. Those who have lost animals know how it takes away a piece of your soul when they go. Dogs in particular, as someone who's had dogs my whole life, know that they give us a lot while they're here, but they take a piece of us when they go. And this was an incredible piece that not only serves as a wonderful tribute to Callie, but it immortalizes her forever in our hearts and our minds through the story. Kristen's stories are wonderful intersections of art and science, but I had to call out this piece in particular because it really is a work of art. Shout out number 5, Death's Embrace, which is a flash fiction by Tina G for prompt 12. I believe this is my first time reading Tina G's work, but this entry for the 12th flash fiction prompt blew me away. The story has exquisite pacing, a very profound ending, and a message that to me says that we should all remember that we don't know how much time we have, so we should spend it wisely. And that's kind of the takeaway I got from the story, and for that reason I wanted to shout it out. Shout out number 6 is TP Chaos's Drowning in the Quiet. So TP Chaos, as everyone may remember, won the Devine Challenge last week, and they continue to put out just incredible stories, almost on a daily basis. They're putting me to shame, and I try to publish stuff every day too. So, I mean, this is a writer to watch. Let me just put it that way. Everything they put out is great quality, really creative, excellent pacing. The imagery's great. The writing style is very similar to my own, so I think that's why I gravitate to it so much. Not that I'm narcissistic or anything. I have a style, and what I write, I also like to read, and Chaos definitely falls into that category. So the piece that I'm shouting out this week, Drowning in the Quiet, is for anybody who's struggled with panic attacks, depression, or any other similar mental health issues, myself being someone like that. And this particular piece is just extremely haunting, and it's very accurate in how it portrays these things, and it's a deep dive into the internal battle that kind of plays out in those scenarios. As I mentioned in my review of the piece via my Restack, posts like this force us to bleed out onto the page, but in the process, we make our demons bleed too. And in doing so, we take some of their power away from them, especially when we know their names. So check this one out for sure, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. All right, and that fixes up all of our shout-outs this week. You'll find links to these stories in the show notes, and if you want to be featured in a weekly shout-out, send me a DM on Substack, and I'll check out your work. I try to follow, as many of my subscribers' stories as I can, but at the end of the day, I'm only human, and I'm a human being who lost power multiple times this week. So it's never personal if I miss your piece. If you want to get a shout-out, though, for sure, reach out in the DMs, and I'll be sure to make it work for you as soon as I can. All right, moving right along. This week in stories time. So as always, it's been a busy week. As I mentioned earlier, I try to publish every day. So let's see what happened this past week on my publication, The Writer's Journey. First up is The Soul's Ambrosia. This is a poem with a really unique concept that I did a little while back, and I was excited to publish it on Substack with some new edits as well, right before it went live. The piece is about an entity that can only exist when creativity is happening. It sort of feeds off the energy that happens when people are writing stories, poems, or even, painting or drawing or any kind of art. I had this piece in my drafts, and I wanted to expand it with some extra lore to make the whole concept feel a little bit more grounded. And what do you know? I found my inspiration in Isabella Neshawat's work on Substack. She uses Greek mythology as the basis for all of her stories, and reading that work really gave me the idea to actually, as the title suggests, use ambrosia from Greek mythology as a basis for where the entity came from. So that's what ended up happening in there, and you should check it out. It's a great poem, and I would love to hear what you think about some of that Greek mythology-inspired elements. Okay, next up is The Greater Good. So this piece is set in the fictional town of Clenchport, Virginia, which is a place that I created for my upcoming animated series, The Chronicles of Clenchport. I also recorded audio this past week for a companion podcast set in the same town. That podcast is going to be called The Many Worlds of Clenchport. Sarah actually has a few lines in the podcast that I've written so far, so keep an ear out for that. The Greater Good is a story about a new character in Clenchport named Raymond Todd. He's the sole employee at the Clenchport Funeral Home and Crematorium. This story reveals his role as a guardian of the town who feeds living souls to a creature sleeping beneath the surface. Now, Clenchport is a special town because it's something called a nexus in my broader horror mythos. You see, in that universe, our entire realm, the Milky Way galaxy and the universe that we know, is part of a larger network of nexus points that are known as the synaptic sprawl. And in this universe, a nexus is a special point where all possible iterations of that location exist above and below one another. So think of it laid out like a multiverse, right? But it's structured like synapses in the brain. And these nexus points are kind of the only places where you can enter or leave the multiverse if you're someone who knows how to do that. So as a result, the nexuses have a lot of power and energy flowing through them because in other cases, the parallel universes of any given location are spread out across the sprawl. But in Clenchport, which is a nexus, every version is right next to each other. This means that you get some odd events where other parallel realities start bleeding through, among other potential issues. That said, it's not clear if Raymond in this story is a resident in our universe, or if this story is playing out in a parallel version of Clenchport. Both are possible given the world that it exists in, and you'll learn more about how that works in the podcast, which delves into some stories across various parallel universes. So stay tuned to my publication, this podcast, and other content that I produce to find out more, and when you can figure out more mysteries behind the town of Clenchport, Virginia. And keep in mind that Clenchport will also continue to develop across short stories, as well as that companion podcast and the animated series. It's all part of a transmedia universe, meaning that every story exists on different types of mediums, but they all kind of stand alone as well. So stay tuned for updates. Speaking of my horror mythos, the next story that came out this last week is called The Forbidden Resurrection. So this was initially a piece that I did for my first ever writing battle contest, and if you haven't done one of those, they're really cool. You have different themes throughout the year that you can kind of sign up to join, and when it comes time for you to write, you get a set of tarot cards that are together making up your prompt. And you can redraw elements of these cards a certain number of times if you want to change up a piece of it, but the general theme will always be the same. So the Forbidden Resurrection was a piece that I got using 3 tarot cards that were the Cemetery Tale, Film Set, and Lovers. So all those elements had to be included. And this piece was meant to be a soft introduction to my overall horror mythos. It tells the story of a horror film's final scene as it's being filmed. And I don't want to say more because that would spoil some of the fun. Just know that this is set in the broader multiverse that I mentioned, that Clenchport's also part of. So try to keep an eye out for some of those connections. Next up was my flash fiction for day 8 called Pirates and Pariahs. This piece is a Devine tale for those who enjoy them, and it was about Fintan Marybrook searching for a pirate named Jameson Netherwave. In this piece, a pirate prisoner is telling Fintan his story, and Fintan quickly realizes that the prisoner is not as good of a storyteller as Fintan is, and of course hilarity ensues. Next we've got a poem that I published called The Mind's Mirror. This was a cool piece where I had every line in each stanza subtract from the total number of words until you got down to 2 words in the last line. The theme of the poem is how your home reflects the state of your mind. After that, we had Flash Fiction Day 9, which was a prompt from Sarah as part of the wild cards, and this prompt was about a nuclear bomb going off in a nearby town or city. In my piece titled A Failed Experiment, we join a family living outside the city who soon discovers that aliens have dropped a nuke, the one from the prompt, of course, and I'll let you find out where it goes from there. On February 10th, I released my biggest Devine tale yet. The Flames of Redemption is the story of the last dragon in Devine, and like all of my Devine tales, it has full audio narration. It's an emotional piece with over 20 minutes of audio, so definitely check it out and let me know what you think. Flash Fiction Day 10 brings us to my story entitled To the End, which was an emotional tale about a World War II female pilot who was sent on a mission to save the world after the Nazis unleashed an eldritch horror on planet Earth. I really like this one, and a lot of other people did as well, it seems. So check that one out. If you only get to read one this week, I would do that one. Next up on February 11th is my article on 10 writing lessons that I've learned in the last 10 years. This was fun. It's packed with all kinds of hopefully helpful tips about writing, publishing, sourcing images, and more. February 11th's flash fiction was titled The Uninvited Guest. This is another story set in my horror mythos, and in this one we join an immortal hunter known as a warden who protects the multiverse from the things that lie beyond it, and he finds himself undercover at a dinner party surrounded by ancient gods wearing human skin. It's a wild one. I really had a lot of fun writing it. I also published a new poem on February 11th, inspired by some sad news from one of our subscribers, who I mentioned earlier, Kristen Rosenbach. As I had already discussed, she lost her dog, Callie, and after reading her story, I really was inspired to do a piece on sort of a tribute to all that we've lost. And it's a reminder that when we write these people and our pets into our stories, we ensure that they will live forever. And that piece is called Immortality. Flash Fiction Day 12 brought Chaos Theory, a crazy story that I did that involves time travel, dreams, and the Titanic, if you can believe it. I also wrote a cool meta article for this piece that you'll see inside of that story, and I designed that whole article in Canva to make it look like it existed in, that universe. A lot of people really enjoyed this one, and I had a couple people tell me that it was their favorite. Check it out. And that brings us to Valentine's Day. Due to the snowstorms here and losing power and internet, I'm behind on my flash fictions, and the podcast is coming out pretty late here. I'm recording this after sundown. But I did manage to post a poem today dedicated to my Valentine, Sarah, and it's called Reflections. It's a poem that's meant to be a conversational piece where I'm talking to myself and eventually also speaking to Sarah, essentially, as she helps me sort of escape the demons inside my own mind. It's a really cool piece, another one of my experimental ones, and I'm really proud of it. So I would love it if you checked it out. All right, next up is our writing tip of the week. This is the segment where I share some advice on writing. And this week, I wanted to share my plans for a table of contents post on my Substack. And if you haven't seen these, I actually saw a few big accounts talking about this and showing examples. It's essentially a pinned post on your publication where you have links to your work organized by the type of post. See, now I'm doing, as I've mentioned, multiple connected universe stories in different genres, like Devine and my Synaptic Sprawl stories. And then I've also got poetry and articles. So this seemed like a great idea. And here's how I'm going to do it, if you would like to try your hand at it as well. I'm going to write a post called The Writer's Journey, Content Directory. In the post, I will organize all my current and future items that I publish into different sections, as I mentioned, based on where they fall in terms of their subject matter or style. The idea here is that when someone new subscribes and they go to the publication, they can find anything they're looking for quickly, and this also works for people who are already subscribers that are just trying to come check out the latest poem, for example. Now, something like this will require me to keep it updated, but once I've published it, I'm basically just going to, you can hover over the post on your homepage there, and you look for the 3-dot menu beside the like, comment, and share buttons, and that's where you'll find the option to pin it to your homepage, and that will keep it front and center, and you can kind of use it as an updated directory if you so choose. I do think it's a great idea, so that's why I wanted to share it as part of this segment this week. All right, and next we have Bradley's Substack Soapbox Rant, and this is kind of a continuation of last week, given that I've dealt with similar problems this week, but, let's start at the beginning, okay? This week's rant is about the weather, and it's about more than that, but much like the snow that bombarded my house a few days ago, this rant also has layers. So layer 1 is the weather. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm getting pretty tired of the Earth literally bombarding us with reminders about climate change while the idiot in chief is pretending it's all a hoax and his cronies are actively working against any chance we have to survive as a species. So allow me to apologize on behalf of all of humanity, or at least the smart ones, to Gaia. We're sorry, and we're doing our best, but the people in power are really trying their hardest to mess this up, so, we'll keep fighting the good fight. But before I go down a really depressing rabbit hole there, let me go ahead and pivot here. You see, the power went out for me earlier this week, and the internet's been out as well since Wednesday, and I'm using a hotspot and data to catch up in the meantime, but a lot of people, based on my research and stuff, checking the local subreddit, they are still without power, and it's very cold here. We're talking sub 30 degrees Fahrenheit at night. And to say nothing of the fact that some of these people probably work from home like I do. And so at this point in society and as a civilization, internet and electricity are pretty crucial. And these companies just don't seem to care about it. And to be clear, I'm not talking about the people that are out there, human beings, who are working, day and night, literally lately, to fix this stuff. Those people are heroes. I'm not talking about them. They're doing their damn best. The problem is that the executives at the top of these companies are choosing not to perform basic maintenance and other things that lead to problems like this. And so all this came to me the other night when I was, it was dark, power was out. Sarah and I were literally eating takeout pizza by candlelight. And I'm like, wow, this is ridiculous. We went the whole day without power. The food in the fridge was going bad, and it was pitch black. We literally had candles because we didn't, have any other way to get lights on. And so it was really shocking to think about the fact that the entire world came crashing to a halt the second the power went out. And it made me realize that these things are more than just nice to have. And again, there's countries in the world where they don't have electricity and they don't have internet. But the fact of the matter is that these things are becoming a necessity for many people's existence in other parts of the world too. And so as we kind of spread and grow, and more of these countries finally get, basic utilities like this, it should be understood that those things should remain on and reliable because they are really necessary. And honestly, there's got to be more to the story than we're just working on it, because no matter what happens here, my bill's going to be the same this month, and that's not right. I should be reimbursed, or there should be a discount or something, because at this point, the power company's literally charging people for days that they didn't have electricity. And really, it just comes down to the fact that I don't think corporations should be in charge of our basic needs like this. They got nothing but money on the mind, and, I hear you asking, okay, then who should be running these fundamental services, right? The government? No. I mean, yes, but given the people in charge of the government right now, I wouldn't trust them to run things any better. So here's the thing, I wish I had the answers here, but I don't. I know I'm bringing up a lot of stuff here, but let me point out the fact that this is a rant. So I'm just here to, vent. I don't have all the answers, but when I do, trust me, I will let you know. All right, folks. Well, despite everything, we've made it through another week. I can't wait to upload this podcast and get a text from AT&T about how I've burned through all my hotspot data that I actually paid for on top of my regular cell phone plan, but I do not like this timeline. All good. So here's what's coming next week. We're moving right along with Flash Fiction February, so stay tuned for more stories from me. Keep an eye out in the subscriber chat for links to other stories that are inspired by the prompts. And if you haven't joined, plenty of time to jump in. We can do new prompts every day. This coming week, I'll try to get a new Devine tale up with audio as well. We'll see how long it takes me to catch up now that I've got some power back. But no matter what, you'll catch me out there supporting my fellow writers and boosting your stories like always. And that's it for this week's episode. I hope you've all had a wonderful Valentine's Day with your loved ones, or even just as a day to take a moment and love yourself, because you deserve love too. Stay safe, everyone. Have fun with the prompts this coming week, and I hope you have a wonderful and productive week of writing. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.